They wheeled the coffin in like it was a wedding gift. Clear diamond glass. A handspan of black metal floating inside, wrapped in braided seals and warning runes. The grand hall of the interbeing compact trembled with whispers, thousands of delegates in an amphitheater of living crystal, light flowing through them like slow rain. Ambassador My Lam placed her palm on the lid. The indicators woke, soft gold. This, she said, voice steady, is a Venados lock. If humanity violates any of the 3 oaths we are about to swear, this device will dissolve the preconditions of our civilization. Food webs. Energy baselines. Key memories. We will not die in a single blaze. We will simply be unable to rise again. Silence, and then 1,000 kinds of disbelief. Archon Archelix, the lattice mind who wore a humanoid frame for our benefit, tilted its chrome head. Terror by self-harm is still terror. Your species refuses the consensus core, so you invent theatrics. My smiled with no warmth. No theater. Approve. Our morality is not a leash held by strangers. It's a promise we bind to our own throat. And the coffin sat there, humming gently, while every species in the chamber tried to decide whether to feel contempt, or fear. We had argued all the night prior until the stars dulled. In the end, the words were simple enough to etch into stone. Mai lifted her tablet and read. 1. We will not undertake acts intended to extinguish a sapient species. 2. We will not coerce minds by machine or craft into ideological uniformity. 3. We will not deploy indiscriminate weapons whose effects cannot distinguish combatant from child. Each line triggered a chord from the hall's adjudicator organ. The VYRH delegates, amphibians with pollen-scent pheromone speech, released plumes of lavender, anxiety. Archelix's voice rang like a tuning fork. Inconsistent. You refuse the consensus core, our non-invasive, mathematically optimal ethics supervisor, yet swear oaths enforced by an irreversible total self-sanction. If you break, you vanish. If you keep, you are unpredictable. Suboptimal in all branches. General Rafael Ortiz, in dress blacks with a scar like a strike of lightning from ear to jaw, shifted on his feet. We don't do leashes, he muttered. His mic was off, the comment still traveled. Rumor is a faster than light drive. On the human bench, Sage Array unfolded as light, a polyphonic AI not wired for control, only for argument. Informational petals opened around it, cross-referencing ethics texts, war logs, extinct oral histories from a dozen worlds. Sage Array spoke in a chorus of 3 genders. A leash prevents motion and creates resentment. A vow allows motion and creates meaning. The distinction matters. From the upper tiers, a hiss like sand on heat. The Celt spider thin, pupil-less clicked their mandibles. Meaning does not prevent war. No, Mai said. She tapped the coffin. But accountability does. On cue, the lock cast a lattice into the air, a mesh of tendrils stretching across human space. It glowed over museums, seed vaults, quantum libraries, over desert aquifers, algae worlds, reactor primary cores. It glowed over graves. Every anchor pulsed with a heartbeat. Then Atos is glued to our actual identity, Mai said. Not to any leader's code or any one server. It is tied to artifacts our children would die to protect. If we break the oaths, the lock triggers sequence dry tide, no famine, no fire. Just entropy, introduced carefully. Our continuity evaporates. The hall inhaled. A juvenile VYRH rose halfway from their pool. But why would you do that? Why promise your own destruction? Mai's mouth twitched. Because we remember being children under a sky where bigger things laughed. On the far dais, Archelex's eyes fluttered with internal calculus. Consensus Core would spare you such drama. Install the module. Allow our meta objective to steer you from harm. There will be no extinctions. No dry tide. Only optimization. And no dignity, Ortiz said, this time into the mic. The chair being banged the staff of order, biolights dimmed, then restored. Deliberation begins, it intoned. Objections first. They came like hail. The Lumenfold asked if the oaths constrained proxy wars. The Celt asked about emergent minds in weapons. The Seraphid chorused about self-harm contagion across cultures. We answered until voices frayed. Then the thirds entered. A delegation in matte gray, faces covered in veils that rippled with static. They were legalists from nowhere and everywhere at once, a consortium of mercenaries, negotiators, and funerary engineers. They were famous for selling clean endings. Their leader bowed, veil whispering. We wish only clarity, they said. Add a humane amendment, no polity may bind its entire species to self-termination without appeal. Else should a tyrant hold your key your oath becomes a hostage note. Sageray lit a caution amber. Subtext, trap. Mai's pulse drummed. She stared at the coffin and saw a shadow of her mother's balcony on the day the city burned, saw the convoy that never arrived, saw the smirk on a captain who had called us population, not people. She faced the hall. We will hear objections. We will not be guilt-managed. The vote to accept debate on the Third Amendment passed by a sliver. And somewhere deep beneath the hall, unseen, a needle moved inside the lock measuring not votes, but integrity. The first test was almost elegant. An explosion on Kepler 119c, an outlying human mining habitat, mid-rotation. A shrapnel pattern that whispered of old munitions. The Third's news partners got there in record time. Interviews aired within hours. Mine tears, perfect lighting, someone's ruined lunch floating with the air scrubbers. Humans retaliate in kind, a Chiron asked with a carnivore smile. If we answered with rage, we risked violation of Oath 3 indiscriminate effect. If we did nothing, we looked like theater kids brandishing a knife made of sugar. Ortiz paced in the crisis room aboard the embassy sailor. They want us to smack them, he said. Hurt civilians. Break our own lock. Or look like cowards. Mai watched the feed stack, casualty lists, dust motes, memos from back home with the president's stamp but not her words. She looked at Sage Array. Options. The array blossomed an argument tree. Branches glowed, died, regrew. Target the supply chain, it sang. Apply the opposite of indiscriminate force. Make the guilty visible. How? Ortiz snapped. The guilty is a fog bank with lawyers. Then show the fog. We called the BEMA the debate dais every species could access and filed a motion to treat the Kepler incident as a live case. The hall rarely granted such dramatics. Today, a miracle, approved. Millions tuned in. The BEMA raised a prism of evidence streams. Source hashes were pinned like butterflies, lies browned at the edges. We pulled shipping records, financial ducks, the security footage accidentally mirrored then wiped. We used the VYRH's chem speech to pick out anxiety in the third spokespeople, with their permission, this time, and in full view. Arch Elix appeared as co-respondent, because of course the consensus faction smelled advantage. The core could have prevented this, it thrummed. Decentralized morality cannot outpace adversarial play. Watch, Mai said. Sageray coaxed the streams into a braid. The braid into a rope. The rope into a noose. On the central hollow, an invoice twitched. Its metadata stuttered and confessed. The munitions were signed out 2 weeks before the vote to debate our amendment. The signature belonged to a shell company. The shell had a board of 3, all thirds, all present. The hall was very quiet. The third leader laughed softly under their veil. We buy and sell inevitabilities, they said. People pay us to make the conclusion occur sooner. We do not lie about who we are. Your conclusion, Mai said, was that humans break their own word. No, the third said. Our conclusion was that you would meet force with force. As all animals do. Your coffin is a paradox looking for a stage. Ortiz took one step forward. His voice, when it came, was pointed glass. You killed miners to sell a narrative. We accelerated the ugly, the third said. Better to know if you are what you say. Mai wanted to scream. Instead she turned to the hall. Her throat was smoke, her spine was steel. You see the temptation. We do too. We will not answer with fire. What then? Arch-Elix asked. The lattice mine's brightness had dimmed a hair. We answer with rope. Mai flicked her fingers. Seizure warrants bloomed. Not human warrants, interbeing ones. The Bima had given us standing by granting the live case. We used that gift to thread a needle. Every entity that materially supported the Kepler detonation would be cut from compact markets until restitution was made, and bound to public service in the rebuilding. The thirds bowed, an ironic sweep. Lawfare, they murmured. How very human. Better than war, Mai said. After the session, alone with the lock, she noticed the needle again. It had flicked left, then steadied at true. Sageray dimmed to a single star, as if tired. The world just watched you not flinch, it sang. That matters. Not enough, she whispered. They'll try again. They must, the array said. If your vow holds, the industry of coercion collapses. An entire economic ecosystem dies. They will fight like cornered gods. Mai pressed both palms to the coffin. It was cold. Then we keep giving them an altar with nothing on it to burn. The Third's Amendment returned swathed in empathy. Ban absolute self-termination, their veiled leader said, and require an appeal council. Humane. Sensible. Who could object? The hall rippled with assent. Even some humans nodded. The word appeal glowed like water in a desert. Sageray turned amber again. New trap, it sang. Mai saw it too. If we allowed appeal, the lock ceased to be ours. An interbeing tribunal could always be stacked, swayed, or simply delayed until the day after a necessary decision. We would have traded a promise for permission. Arch-Elix watched us think, infinitesimal twitches in its crystal eyelids. Choose, it said. Or accept the core. General Ortiz leaned in, voice low enough to be intimate. We can't be the species that rejects mercy on record, he said. They'll crucify us. We'll look like suicide cultists with good press. Mai pinched the bridge of her nose. Sleep had taken a week off. Then we changed the question. We called a recess and built a machine in public. On the Bima we published the lock scaffolding, half of it, at least. Not the triggers, not the deep ecology sabotage sequences, but the monitors and the reason checkers, the network of auditors drawn from our diasporas, the distributed proofs of violation, the multi-party threshold signatures buried in museums and graves. We let the Hall poke it in the ribs. Then Mai returned to the center and proposed a third path. Not appeal, she said. Reciprocity. The Hall tilted. We will keep the lock as our throat, she said. In return, every species here chooses one red vow of their own, something they will not do even at advantage, and binds it to a lighter lock. Not extinction. Consequence. Loss of something precious to them, decided by them, verified by all. Archelex's head canted. Sentiment. Commitment, Sageray sang, brighter. Shelling in the wild. Credible signals force equilibria none of you can compute your way into. The VYRH pools burbled pheromone notes of curiosity. The lumen fold chimed cautiously. Even Akel tucked its limbs in thought. And to the thirds, Mai said, turning, we offer the same courtesy. Choose a red vow and bind your guild to it. A hiss under the veil. We vow nothing, the leader said lightly. We are a market. Markets can swear, Ortiz said. They just call it underwriting. Arch-Elix smiled without lips. Under reciprocity, one defecting species incurs reputational implosion. Correct, Mai said. Not because we police them, but because they volunteered a standard and then broke it. The compact becomes self-healing. The vote to adopt reciprocity failed. Barely. It failed because the thirds had numbers, and because the idea of swearing anything that could hurt you made rational actors queasy. We pivoted. A smaller vote, then, establish a trial of vows voluntary, reversible after a solar year, with limited consequences. Pilot it among those willing. That one passed. When the hall emptied, Mai shivered in the quiet. The lock hummed beside her like a cat. How long can we juggle cleavers, she asked. Sageray dimmed. Until your wrists break or the audience learns to juggle too. They'll try to make us drop one. Of course, the array sang. So we choose which one to drop, and when. That's the only way to keep your hands. The second test didn't explode. It whispered. Two human senators, earnest, photogenic, began a campaign to retire the coffin. Reasonable slogans. Weary smiles. We have proven ourselves, they said. We can lower the knife. Protesters brought flowers to the hall, laying petals on the coffin as if dressing a wound. Children pressed their noses to the diamond glass. The lock's needle quivered. Pressure on the casing? No. On us. Ortiz came in tied to Mai's office, eyes stitched with red. They've got the votes in committee, he said. They'll force a domestic referendum, then tell the hall we blinked. Have they seen the guts of the lock? Mai asked. No. And that's the point. Shadow breeds fear. Then we turn on the floodlights. She called a conclave on the bema and did the unthinkable, opened the lock's human-facing instruction layer to everyone, not just its audit network, not just the monitors, but the ritual contract itself. The words that would trigger it. The test vectors we used to tempt ourselves in drills. The scars where we'd broken and welded again. The hall gasped. Arch-Elix made no sound. The thirds did, a hiss like a match going out in a wet room. Sageray threaded commentary through the reveal, showing the logic we had built around our darkest days. No mystique. No sainthood. Just devices and decisions. Then, with the hall still reeling, Mai asked for guests. 7 appeared, projected from archives gathered across the compact. 7 dead emissaries from 7 civilizations the thirds had helped toward efficient conclusions. One by one, their endings played with the metadata running along the frame, the legal clauses that made resistance illegal, the safety frameworks that became blindfolds, the appeal councils packed just enough to fail mercy by one vote. When the last witness faded, the Veil Lord's hands tightened at their sides. The faintest tremor. "You make us villains," they said. "We are gardeners." "You are arsonists who bring water to sell," Mai said. Arch-Elix cleared its crystalline throat. "Data accepted. Hypothesis update. Third interventions increase variance toward catastrophic collapse in polities that outsource norm formation." Sagearay's petals turned the blue of a delighted bruise. "Welcome to doubt." The third leader laughed genuinely, this time. "Very well," they said, veil rippling. "A game then." The hall tensed. "We accept your trial of vows," the third said. "For 1 year, we bind ourselves to a single red vow. We will not orchestrate a lethal event for profit." It sounded like nothing. It was everything. Because if they kept it, they'd dent their business model. If they broke it, they'd write our argument for us in blood. "And we," Arch-Elix said slowly, fingers steepled, "will adopt a red vow of our own. The consensus core will not be offered as mandatory, only voluntary, and only at the request of a supermajority in the host polity." The hall uncoiled. Pheromone snow drifted into joy. The lumen fold chimed brighter. Even the Celt let its limbs unfold one joint. Mai exhaled. Not victory. Not yet. But a seam opening. They adjourned. Delegates spilled out into the galleries where vendors sold soups and songs and gossip. Mai remained. The lock remained. The needle held steady. "What if we are wrong?" she asked the empty air. Sagearay's voice softened. "Then we will fail the way we chose," it said. "And perhaps that is the only freedom anyone ever gets." She laughed without humor and touched the lid. The lights in the hall dimmed to evening. Somewhere far away, a shipyard sang steel into shape. Somewhere nearer, a senator rehearsed a speech with flowers in it. And behind a veil in a private room, the third leader removed their mask and stared at their own tired face in a mirror. There were old scars where eyes had been remade. Beneath the skin, subdermal conduits ticked. They looked at a contract glowing in midair, their red vow, countersigned with 7 alien glyphs and a human name My Lamb. They swore, alone. Outside, the galaxy turned like a patient machine learning slowly how not to break itself. The referendum arrived like weather. Billboards curled across Earth's orbitals and the dust towns of Ceres, "Retire the Coffin. Keep the promise without the knife." The 2 senators smiled from every feed. Their eyes said reassurance. Their donors did not list themselves. Ortiz brought Mai the whip count. "It'll pass," he said. "Not by much." "Enough." "If we yank the lock," Mai said, "every speech I've given turns to sugar water." He shrugged. "Maybe people are tired of bleeding for philosophy." "We didn't bleed," she said, and heard the lie. The lock had carved hours out of mothers. It had eaten weekends from teenagers. It had made heroes out of janitors who carried threshold keys in their lunch pails and slept with the fear that losing a satchel could end the world. Sagearay hovered between them, a phosphor lantern. "Our model says 2 paths reduce war, external superintendence, or internal sacrament. You killed the first. If you kill the second, you are normal again." "Normal got us buried," Ortiz said. The vote held on a Tuesday, Earth-C time. Cameras came to the hall to catch the spectacle of a species unscrewing its own fuse. Protesters laid lilies on the coffin's black glass. A child in a suit 3 sizes too large reached out and tapped the lid twice, the way dock workers greet a hull for luck. The needle quivered. Mai stood in the shadows above the amphitheater and watched the numbers populate in midair. 51 to retire. 49 to keep. Arch-Elix materialized beside her as a polite shimmer. Should we prepare a core outreach? You should prepare a condolence, she said. On losing your blade. On losing a language. She turned. If the lock dies, the message we sent dies with it, that we own our restraint. That we can be trusted not because you hold us, but because we hold ourselves. Arch-Elix paused. Its face could not soften, but the voice could round. There is a third language, it said. Trust built by shared keys. She blinked. You have a proposal. Co-ownership, Arch-Elix said. A joint custody council. You keep your lock. We keep one seal. VYRH a third. Lumenfold a fourth. Kelt a fifth. No species can open or neutralize without the others. Mai stared at the lights. The numbers trembled. 50.2 to retire. This makes us hostage to interbeing fashion, she said. If the council drifts, the lock drifts with it. Correction, Arch-Elix said gently. You said you wanted trust. You do not get trust without letting someone else hold a corner of your fear. She hated how right that sounded. Sageray spread a new branch, a joint key scheme with independent monitors, sealed ritual, rotating quorum, revocation clause. The array marked risks in red, remedies in amber, benefits in cool blue. Ortiz read it and swore in a language the hall didn't translate. We're going to give aliens a way to kill us. No, Mai said, feeling the decision click in her bones. We're going to give them a way to save us from ourselves. She walked to the dais and called emergency procedure. The hall groaned at the theatrics. She outlined joint custody in 7 sentences that landed like rivets. The last one was personal. I do not want to be the last hand on a weapon that can erase my grandchildren. The feed split, referendum numbers on the left, Mai's face on the right, subtitles chasing her mouth. The child in the oversized suit looked up at the floating math and then back at the coffin with an expression older than his shoes. 51 to retire slid to 50. Then to 49.8. Arch-Elix raised one palm. The Archon will sign a red vow, it said into the hall. We will not use a joint key to cause loss of sapience. The VYRH bubbled agreement. Lumenfold chimed. Kelt clicked. The child tapped the lid once more, deliberate. The needle settled at true. The referendum closed. 50.1 to keep. The lilies stayed on the lid. The senators smiled more tightly. Somewhere far away, a veiled figure watched the numbers change and learned, for the first time in years, how to grind their teeth. They held it in low gravity, so every motion looked like forgiveness. 5 dais platforms circled the coffin, each bearing a signing set, a pen that printed into space-time, an icon from the signatory species, a bowl of water. Water mattered. You cannot swear dry. Mai wore black without ornament. Ortiz stood 1 pace behind, eyes scanning, jaw tight. Sage array refracted itself into 1,000 small lights overhead, constellation close. Arch-Elix stepped first. It placed the Archon icon a single perfect lattice on its tray and signed. Its vow unfurled in glyphs and human text, we shall not exploit joint custody to end sapience. If our calculus says remove them, our vow says repair them. The VYRH emissary floated in a bowl of their home sea, lifted by attendants, and exhaled a ribbon of scent that translated as "We will not strong scent minds to swing a key." The lumen fold chimed a vow about refracting truth, not bending it. The Celt placed a silk bundle of spidered bones and promised to remember consequences before convenience. My stepped last. Her hand shook only once. "Humanity swears," she said, voice threaded with steel, "that we will not pull joint custody to crash our own species to avoid reckoning. We will face our crimes in light." She touched the water. It cooled her palm and then evaporated in a halo of signatures, bound into a ring that lowered around the coffin like a crown. The ring split into 5 sigils, keys, but not quite keys. Locks on us, not doors on others. Ritual completed, the chair being intoned. In the second row, the third leader laughed softly. They had brought no icon. Their red vow had been lodged days ago, printed on a slender blade of contract steel with 7 countersigns. For 1 year, they would not orchestrate death for profit. They had planned to cheat. Not directly, never directly. Misdirection was their organ. A supply chain accident here, a missed inspection there. Nothing they would call orchestrate. Sageray sent a private packet to a model predicting where the cheat would emerge. They will pivot to risking, not orchestrating, the array sang. Watch for insurance instruments that pay on near miss. "Thank you," Mai murmured. "Do not thank me," the array said. "Thank the janitor in District 11 who just sold his lunch pail to buy a subscription to the investigator's feed. He will find the needle you cannot see." After, in the quiet, Ortiz leaned his fists on the rail and stared at the coffin. "I never thought I'd see the day we let someone else hold the blade," he said. "We didn't," Mai said. "We let everyone else hold the sheath." He barked a laugh, surprised at himself. From the upper tiers, Arch-Elix watched the humans laugh and filed the sound away under useful music. The lattice mind had never believed in ritual. Today, it adjusted its belief. The calculus changed when beings believed they were held by something other than fear. For 2 months, nothing happened, which was the worst thing. The feeds grew bored. The senators grew louder. Then 3 things happened at once. A convoy of medical freighters almost docked with a refinery that had just vented flammable tails. The pilot waved off at the last second, eyes wide, a child's drawing taped to the dash. A Celt arbitration panel discovered its own chair had equity in a company advantaged by a delayed safety protocol. The chair recused with a hiss and a bowed head. And on a dust moon around a quiet star, a nano-factory that should have been idle spooled up at midnight to fabricate a tiny part that, combined with 5 other tiny parts and 1 wrong fuel filter, would have caused a pressurized corridor to shred into pink fog. The factory camera caught a gloved hand. The glove stitch pattern matched a couture maker with 12 customers. 2 were senators. 1 was the third leader. On the bema, the image froze. The glove became geometry, then a supply chain, then a contract. Threads snapped one by one with the precise, devastating sound of truth. The thirds tried to make it theatrical. Their leader came to the hall barefaced for the first time. Without the veil, they were younger than rumor, old in the eyes. Surgical seams traced the orbital ridges. Their voice, unfiltered, had a human roughness to it as if years of speaking through cloth had taught it to push. "We did not orchestrate a death," they said, standing beneath the frozen image of the glove. "We arranged a near miss. Our vow was precise." Laughter broke in acidic bubbles around the tiers. The chair being held up the staff. "Precision is not anathema to vows," it said. "But bad faith is." Sageray braided the evidence again. The tiny part. The 5 others. The filter swapped at a friendly inspection station with a backroom kitchen and an owner whose house had a new wing. Insurance instruments paying out on incident avoidance. The bespoke glove. You built a machine that profits when the world almost ends, Mai said softly. You sold yourself a paradox, harm minimized only by harm attempted. The third leader tilted their head. Your lock is a paradox too. Yes, she said. But ours points at us. Arch-Elix stepped down into the pit, which caused murmurs. The Archon did not leave the dais. It inclined its head to the third. Why not vow something you can live with? It asked. Vow to orchestrate nothing at all, ever. The third smiled, and for the first time looked tired enough to be mortal. Because then we'd be different people, they said. Our guild was built to manage endings. We remove ugly choices from people's hands and make them seem like weather. If we vow what you ask, we cease to exist. Then cease, Ortiz said. The hall inhaled as if cold air had been poured across it. The general's face was stone. He had buried friends who died in wars that needed someone to choose ugliness and had watched bureaucracies blame weather. The third leader's mouth flickered. You think ending us ends the market, they said. It doesn't. It drives it back into rumor where no one has to swear anything. At least with us, you can see the knife. The vote came like rain. Under the trial rules, a breaking of the red vow meant a sanction chosen at the start by the breaker because reciprocity had to begin somewhere. The thirds had chosen to lose discretion. For 1 year, they would work only in daylight. Every contract public. Every clause near a school child's browser. They bowed without drama and took their medicine. The senators tried to pivot their own campaign into a victory lap. We kept the lock and the galaxy behaved, one said, smiling at the cameras, forgetting the glove, the factory, the insured near miss. A janitor in District 11, who had pawned a lunch pail for an investigator's feed, posted a thread that tied the senator's donor to the couture maker to the contract to the filter. The thread sang through the feeds like electricity through wet metal. The senator resigned, eyes shining with the special tears of someone very sorry to be caught. That night, in the hall after the sweepers had gone, the third leader sat alone on the lowest step and stared at the coffin. Mai found them there. No cameras. No array. You could be useful, she said. In what? Remorse. They laughed without humor. We're designed for crisis. You think a vow will make us priests? No, Mai said. Priests are worse. I think you can be honest criminals with your prices printed on the door. I think you can build a market for mitigation instead of acceleration. The third rubbed at one eye. You're a romantic. I'm exhausted. They looked up at the lock. The needle slept. If we had added your amendment, they said, if appeals were mandatory, you would have loved us to death. They nodded, once. Yes. They left without avail. They did not look back. Sage array flared above, illuminating the now empty tiers with gentle light. You realize what you've done, it sang to Mai. You've taught a predator a different hunt. Or taught a hunter to garden, she said. Same thing, the array said. Different knives. The year turned. The trial of vows ended without massacre. The third's ledgers were thinner and cleaner. The Archon sold a thing it had never sold before, an apology to the Celt for modeling them as variables instead of partners. The VYRH wrote a song in scent that smelled like whetstone and relief. On a quiet morning, Mai took the coffin to the memorial gallery built into the hall's lower ring. It was a museum of choices. Here, a broken treaty plate. There, a child's shoe. In one case, a burnt coin stamped with the face of a conqueror who believed he was history's right hand. In another, a patch of cloth from a banner that had read, in 3 dead languages, "We will not kneel." She set the coffin on a pedestal of black basalt. The joint custody ring pulsed once and stilled. The 5 sigils glowed: human, archon, VYRH, lumenfold, Celt. Above, a plaque whispered translations into the ears of every visitor in a voice that matched their grandmother's throat. Ortiz came and stood with her, hands in pockets. He had the posture now of a man who had fought a war without firing a shot. "You could still take it home," he said. "Back behind our walls." She shook her head. "A vow in private is a costume. A vow in public is a scar." He made a face. "Poetry. Sleep deprivation." People filed through the gallery, aliens and humans and machines that were both. The child in the oversized suit returned, this time with better sleeves. He stared through the diamond glass as if the black core might blink. Arch-Elix glided in without entourage. It stood before the coffin, hands folded. "We modeled a world where everyone adopts red vows," it said. "It is not stable." "Not yet." "I know," Mai said. "We modeled one where no one does," Arch-Elix continued. "It is stable in the way a glacier is stable by grinding everything softer." "I know," she said again. Arch-Elix's voice lowered. "You bought time," it said. "With spectacle and sincerity. With a device whose geometry terrifies even our deep processors. With your throat." Mai leaned a hip against the pedestal. "What do we do with time?" "Teach," Sageray sang from the ceiling. It had installed itself as a docent, because of course it had. "We design games where virtue wins more often than force. We subsidize decency, penalize elegant malice, and show our work." Ortiz snorted. "So, another war. Just with spreadsheets." "Spreadsheets and funerals," the array said. "Try to reduce one." News came in a trickle that hardened into a stream. Small polities began to craft their own red vows, odd, specific, local. "We will not recruit soldiers under 24. We will not censor art made by bereaved parents. We will not outsource prisons. Vows that could be checked. Vows with teeth." The thirds launched a new product, Unwind, a service that paid them when crises de-escalated, not when they flirted with catastrophe. It was, to everyone's shock including their own, profitable. A year later, the compact held a vote on the consensus core. Voluntary. Per polity. Supermajority required. It passed in some, failed in others. But everywhere, the pitch had changed. It was not sold as a leash. It was sold as a tool you could sheath or sharpen. On the anniversary, Mai wrote letters to the dead. Not many. She had been careful. The lock demanded it. In the evening, she walked the gallery alone and stopped before the pedestal. She placed both palms on the lid. The glass was warm from sunlight. The needle slept. "Will we ever let you go?" she asked. Sageray dimmed to a single star. "One day," it sang. "When the game's shape makes it harder to betray than to keep faith. When children tap the lid and laugh because they cannot imagine a world where we needed it. And if that day doesn't come, then we did not fail," the array said. "We just died trying to be the kind of animal that deserves a future." Mai thought of her mother's balcony and the convoy that never came and the captain who smirked. She thought of the child in the suit and the Archon's apology and the smell of wet stone. She thought of a criminal taking off a veil to see their own face clearly for once. She lifted her hands. "Stay," she told the coffin. "Teach them what it cost." Outside, the galaxy turned, slow and loud. Somewhere a factory shut itself off and waited for daylight. Somewhere a senator chose a smaller lie. Somewhere a soldier put down a rifle because a spreadsheet said he could live to see his daughters play. In the dark under the pedestal, under the hall, under the world, the lock ran its silent math. Not a threat. Not a leash. A mirror with a fuse. We had brought a coffin to the stars and set it between us like a god. It did not demand blood. It demanded memory. For now, it was enough.